think that's the handle. And you're listening to Homestead Grown Live. This is the live radio show for the Homestead Grown community, the ever-growing Homestead Grown community. So welcome. It is Friday, and today's show is the second podcast, but today's show is about the plan. So if there's one thing that I am able to share tonight, I hope it is an appreciation that the idea of feeding your family from foods that you produce yourself, grow yourself, or source through hyper-local economies is because um, so a couple things. One, Podbean allows you to um, basically you can put it on every podcast. So Podbean helps do that. So if you use uh, Amazon Music, we're on there. We're also, if you say to Alexa, hey Alexa, play the Homestead Grown podcast. There's Google. So whatever your favorite podcast app is, you will to listen to us on that app. But the live show, the website, and so you'll be able to listen live in the near future. So another thing, I am running the board, as they say, which means I am trying to work all the software and do everything. So there's a good chance that if you are listening and you wanted to join in the conversation, that I may miss the fact that you have indicated that you want to join in the live show, meaning you want to participate in the live show. And if I do, forgive me. It is not intentional. It's just a lack of my experience at this point in being able to juggle all of the different, just trying to get through the material that I've prepared. I'll look at something that I spent hours drafting throughout the week, and I'll stare at it and wonder what it was that I meant to say. And I'm sure everyone has had an experience like that. And in due time, I will get a little more relaxed with delivering the content. Why it is, it has something to, I think, with live radio, or in air quotes. But anyway, so again, tonight's topic is the plan. So let's revisit a couple of things. The plan is one of the four, and those four components are and then the second, which we covered last week, which is hyperlocal economies. And if you'll recall, if you didn't listen to that episode, go ahead and give it a listen. We will probably circle back and do that one again because there was a lot of information that was left out of that component. The third component is is grow model gardening. And the fourth is grow model animal husbandry. And gardening is gardening, although there's 1,500 different ways to garden. We're not necessarily introducing a new way to organizing uh, how we garden. And the same thing with animal husbandry. So the way you take care of animals, you still take care of animals, but the way we think about how many animals we need and how we move them around the farm, or move them around the homestead, if you will, is perhaps unique, perhaps not, but it's important to food. Okay. So those again are the four components tonight. Focusing on the plan, I wanted to talk about. Let me kind of the overarching the 50,000-foot flyover, if you will, of what the plan is. So, in order to execute on anything of this size, it's good to break things down into smaller chunks, label those chunks, and then if you can, even chunk it down further into bite-sized morsels. We're talking about food, so it's a good analogy there. Um, so that it's consumable, and you can know where you are on the plan, and you can know what you need to do piece of the plan rather than always being concerned about otherwise it just gets overwhelming. So a plan is just what it is. We're all accustomed to, or we're all familiar with plans, but break things down into um, those smaller morsels, and we're going to talk about what those morsels are. I don't think I'm going to get into too much detail about each one. We'll do that in future episodes, and we'll do that as hopefully we start to produce some um, handouts and other materials so that we can share not just the detail, but actually where you can start to document the plan yourself. The goal is again, as we're working through these episodes together, we'll probably cover the same material a number of times, but as people join in, then they may want to start to documenting the plan themselves, and then can be a resource to help chat through what questions might have and what ideas folks have. So that's the goal. Um, okay. Okay. So let's talk about those morsels. We want to talk about something I'm going to call global variables. And into our models, variables that are global. So things like how many people are we actually feeding? So let's say 5 have enough food for global variable. And everything that we do, when we talk about portions and other things, we may multiply times that variable. So we may multiply times 7, but that can change. So, and that's why it's a variable, because it can change. But once we establish that variable, it should be good for the year at least. But if it changes throughout the year, we can also adjust it in the plan so that the anything downstream of the date that we make the adjustment in the plan is changed according to the value of that variable. There are other global variables, things like um, the last and first frost variable, because it will inform when you plant, when you have how many successions you can have. Um, and if you are using season extenders, how long can you extend those seasons based on where you are those are these things again, when we're filling these variables out, we'll go into more available or just obvious, like the how many people are we feeding. The first thing we're going to do after we establish or we fill out our global variables sheet be to and the idea behind a food journal is, again, we're not dieting, so we're not worried about calories or carbs recording what the facts are. So we want to try to get a feel for what do we truly eat as a family, and even as individuals, if there's special diets and things of that nature, versus what it is that we would like to think that we eat. So we but we know that the other thing that's important in doing the food journaling is to try to get a feel for how often we eat things like meats, certain vegetables, because we may think again that we eat corn all the time, and we may find that we actually only eat corn once, 3 or 4 times a week. That may become very uncomfortable for a lot of the folks in the family. So the reality is. So I like to think of this as current state. So what is our okay? So that's the food journaling. We're going to do that for 30 days at least. You could skip doesn't require. None of this data gets fed into anything. It's really more for information, and it informs what the reality is, so that when we go on to our next step, we can we can more accurately or let's we collect what it is that our future state will be based on our current state, so that we don't have such a shift in our current state to the future state that it becomes uncomfortable and a train wreck for the family. Okay, so the next step is we're actually going to do meal planning. Now I've said this to my wife, and it's like it's a dirty word or something. So meal is, let's take what we know about what we do eat, and then let's kind of lay over top of that what a whole foods version of that might look like. And then let's do that for as many meals as we can. And then let's multiply that times as many weeks, months that we are trying to establish our food system for. So, if we're trying to establish a food system for 90 days, and we come up with 30 individual meals, 30 different breakfasts, 30 different lunches, 30 different dinners, that means we would need to multiply each one of those times three, so that we would make those things three times. Hopefully, that makes sense. Um, right. So, if I have 30 different breakfast menus, and I'm going to eat for 90 days, then I would multiply 30 times three. That's 90. It means I would have 90 breakfasts, and I would just repeat the same breakfast, the 30 breakfasts three times. Okay. But that meal planning, as we get a little bit more in depth, is also going to include the calendar. There are things, special occasions. So things that may not seem obvious, but they add up. So, for instance, in my household, we have dinner with my wife's parents every Sunday. We do not cook dinner. We never cook dinner. They cook dinner. One day, until ready to relinquish that, we will continue. We then have 52 dinners a year that we don't need to provide for or plan for. So, if you have something similar, even on a much smaller scale, then you may want to consider that. But you also may want to consider season. So we're going to try to eat as best we can foods that are ripe and fresh in season, rather than things that are stored and preserved. So we will overlay in our meal plan different meals that are better suited for different seasons, so that we can take a full advantage of those particular ingredients being available in season. Now, this is where we start to get things can get really complicated. And this is why, again, I want everyone to walk away from this with, you don't have to keep all this in your head. The plan is collect the information, work for you, and you'll have and when you harvest what, or what the estimated harvest dates and things are. Sole advantage of your storage capacity, and you are only storing foods that you need to store season and when fresh. Now, having said that, we got to be flexible, right? We could say that the only thing that's in season in winter are a few salad type greens, but we're not going to eat salad for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in winter. So we will try to maximize the use of the things that we can naturally um, harvest and grow throughout every season, but we're not going to suffer nutritionally, or put ourselves in a position where we're going to bed hungry, simply because we're trying to be purists, which is, just so you know, is typically the angle I come from. So I'm speaking to myself as much as I'm anyone else even been on. Makes me wonder if mine on or if anyone can even hear me. But anyway, I'm just going to keep plugging away and hope that this is actually getting out there. Um, okay. So after we do our meal plan and we've built up, and you could start small. By the way, you could start with just 7 days, and then let's see how it goes. And we're going to walk the entire, so we don't have to start huge. One of the things I learned from the last time trying to do this is the more you try to take on, there's so many moving parts. There's so much. There's so many layers to this. It quickly becomes overwhelming. So the more like you know you better than I do. What best suits you and what will help you to continue to move forward. Um, but let's just say you took just a week of meals. What we would do is we would take from those meal plans and we would extract, and I'm going to call it ingredient mining. So our recipes in our 7 days of meat breakfast, the ingredients that are required in order to prepare those. It can be a lot, right? What we might want to do, and why it might be not be a bad idea just to go with 7 days at first, is you might realize that you don't need to be as um, it doesn't need to be as complex as we can sometimes make it out to be. Maybe whole food, a couple of culinary actually is good. And we don't have to have real fancy dishes. Maybe on occasion we do, and we can celebrate those and I'll enjoy them. But on the normal day to day, do we really need to have a recipe that has 20 ingredients in it or 10 ingredients? How about if it has 5 or less in every meal? That means you're eating pretty close to as clean and as whole as you can possibly eat. So maybe you've got a vegetable or two, you've got a meat, you've got some spices that season the meat, you've got some type of a fruit or preserve that goes with the meal, and it's as simple as that. And simple sometimes can be very good. But anyway, so we extract the ingredients, or as I like to say, we mine the ingredients, and we record how much of everything is needed for that recipe for a certain. Then we'll multiply that times our global variables, and we will determine if the recipe serves, say, 5, and we need 10. Then we double the recipe, we double the ingredients. And I know I'm oversimplifying there, but basically, but you get what I'm saying. And we come up with here's how much we would need to produce ourselves, grow ourselves, or source ourselves. So once we have done our ingredient mining and we've established what it is that we require, we can we then look and say, okay, what is it that we will source ourselves, or what is it that we will produce ourselves? Maybe we, like last week, we talked about some folks that may not be for eggs, right? So if you can't it's going to, or you can't, then it's going to be difficult for you to produce your own eggs, but you could source them from a hyper local source. So you would put the eggs um, as a source requirement, as opposed to maybe you have a little asparagus patch, and that asparagus patch is in with enough harvest capacity for a number of weeks of frozen asparagus to add to your eggs or to add to your breakfast. And so you can put the asparagus down as something that you produce yourself, and you'll record for each ingredient who is going to provide that, whether it's yourself, whether it's going to hyper local sources as far out as you go in order to source them as close as you can to you. Um, and so you record that. And now we know here's the things I need to go, I'm going to purchase from someone else. Here are the things I'm going to grow myself. Here are the things I already grow, and teach yourself in order to grow the things or raise the things that you indicate that you're going to tackle. And then you out to source the things. And there are certain websites that can help you source hyperlocal as well, and you could use those, or you can just they may be interested in providing, so that you can then purchase those things from your neighbor and or from your child. Okay, I kind of skipped a part here, and that's where we get into the actual grow models, and this is where things get really um, I think it gets kind of fun from a model perspective, but this is where it gets you got to take all of the information that we've been gathering, all of the global variables, and we need to start plugging them into the models to tell us if we're going to grow something ourselves or we're going to source it. How many do we need? When do we need them? So if we're growing it ourselves, when do we need to start the thing from seed? Can we even start it from seed indoors? Or if it's an animal, do we have the animal? Do we have the capacity to then how many do we need so that the housing is adequate, the watering is adequate, plus what it is that we need to start, what it is in the case of vegetable, we can end up with the correct number wrong. So we'll always have figures that allow for Mother Nature and or human error. Would then know how many plants we need to have in the ground. Plantings, third plantings, and so on and so forth, succession plantings we would have so that we could have the most number of plants that are required for us to be able to eat those particular meals according to our meal plan in the freshest state possible, with whatever the requirement is at the end of the season, weighted simply for operation, whether that be canning, preferred method for that particular vegetable or fruit or meat um, would be. And I hope this is making sense. Again, this is kind of the 50,000-foot flyover. We'll get into the details on each one of these things, especially as we start to provide the hard copy worksheets that you can start to fill out as you go along. But those grow models are really the backbone of the whole preference and guard is you choose your method and you do your thing. Some people will say some people do square foot, some people do rows. The heart of this food system is really about being able to plan for and lay out when you do what in order to get the harvest, either for uh, like an end of season crop or to eat. So over preservation. So I kind of went through a list of preserving methods or preservation methods, and there are many. The primary ones, the less exotic, if you will, are going to be canning and freezing. Some people will dry things, especially when it comes to herbs and spices. You can dry, and there are other things that you can dry, and you probably will uh, dehydrate. And in some instances, your preference will determine whether or not you can or freeze. I, for example, do not like canned peas. Let's say canned peas to me taste. I don't like the texture. I don't like the color. There's very little about canned peas that I like. frozen green. People who are they can't stand the frozen, but they like the canned, and so whatever your preference is, oftentimes will determine what method you use. Not always. There are some things that you'll need to do um, for other reasons, like you only have so much freezer space, so you got to take the amount of freezer space you have and are willing to invest in, and you maximize that freezer space for the things that you abhor when they're canned. And so you freeze those things, and maybe some other things that you may prefer to be frozen don't get frozen because you just don't have the space. But that's also part of the model. So we need to determine what it is we're going to be preserving, and then how much we're preserving, and in what method. And the reason we need to do that is there's only so many square feet of shelf space. And if we don't have enough square feet of shelf space, then can we increase the number of square feet of shelf space? If we can, then we've got ourselves a little project that we can set out to more. We've got room for another freezer, and we're perfectly okay. Then we can recalculate what we're capable of freezing, and in my case, I can have less canned peas. Again, hopefully, this is all making sense. And the big picture here is, with a plan, all of comes time, and it comes the time comes due for you to preserve things. The reality of it's going to hit you, and again, overwhelm. So we're trying to reduce the overwhelm. My fear is that by trying to reduce the overwhelm and explaining all of this, it causes overwhelm. But this episode, we'll be able to record all this on paper, and we'll be able to follow that plan, and it won't have to be sitting in our brains, kind of swimming around. And the last is, and I was storage. So we've got our source determination, and we have our storage models. And in our models, again, the idea is we have a calendar in what from our food stores and what those food stores contain, so that we can make we have for the ingredients. So as ingredients are emptied off the shelves, they make room for new ingredients. And so if we can get ourselves on a nice rhythm, and there will always be things that go wrong. Right? So there's go to all this trouble and find ourselves without food. It would be much better to have more than less, because in more, especially in bad situations, then you're in a position to share with others. And we should actually, I think we should factor into all of our grow models, um, if we can, the ability to provide food for others, and maybe even others we don't even know at this point. Maybe it's just someone who shows up at the door who's hungry, and we have already planned for them. What a beautiful thing. All right. So, again, I think, not sure if I vote, but we covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, mostly because I think I talk probably pretty fast. And I'm talking pretty fast because I'm nervous, and I'm trying to communicate so much information in such a short period. So forgive me and stick with me. We'll 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 make this more consumable as time goes on, and that's, again, from the first time I did this or started to do this to now. The thing that I've learned is break things down into small pieces as possible, and repetition's okay. Had these thoughts 100 times before, and I feel like I've tore And if I'm still here, Mike, thank you. I appreciated all the support. Um, and I think probably if he's listened to me even the last time we did this, he probably heard the same things 3 or 4 times. But that's good, right? Repetition is not necessarily a bad thing. So, I think that's the wrap on those. I will have a form where we can start submitting questions, comments, uh, and, uh, how it works for you, so we can learn from each other, which is valuable. Now, I want to segue to one thing, and I think this will make the cut for the podcast too. What I want to segue to is before the end of the year or the very beginning of next year, um, we're going to actually launch our own community. So in that community, we will be able to be entirely focused on just this concept. And the idea is that community will serve to support one another and to help one another to actually execute the plan. Whatever the plan is that you as an individual or as a family decide you want to accomplish. So it might not be everyone's goal, like it is mine, to have a year's worth of food and the plan to be able to be executed. If I could not do anything for a year, my family could eat. Growing a little bit here and there and sourcing a little bit here and there. But whatever your goal is, it's helping you utilize this concept to execute that goal and to realize it. So that will start again the end of this year, early next. And so when I say that this is the live radio show of, so if you go out to home or if you go to community.homesteadgrown.org, you will see there a little there, but you'll see the shelf thing there, and things will start to be populated in that community, and that community will actually be the kind of the rallying point for all of this, and a lot of exciting things I think are going to come out of that from my professional experience and in my gardening and homesteading and ranching experience. I'll bring to that just to give you some ideas. You benchmarking and best reports for and your ability to know that if you are able to produce 5 pounds of tomatoes from a plant, is that or of a particular variety in a particular region, and you learn that really that's about half as much as what everyone else is producing, then you might ask yourself, well, how are then the best practices report would play? So having the ability for us to, as a community, share our data, and then having people within the community be able to do analysis of that data and provide actionable feedback to the community. I enable us to more efficiently meet our goals. So if I can, in my little example of half as many tomatoes, if I can produce the same yield from half as many plants, that means significant savings in time and resources and space in the garden, right? So that's just that. I'll start to share where the vision for that is, and of course, it's a community, so we'll all take part in those things as time goes along. So that is my content for the evening. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you have a great Friday evening. The day after, have a great Thanksgiving. Be safe, and peace be with you.